what prompted you to write the book? Why did you write the book? I thought you were busy traveling the world and doing things. And why write a book?
Well, I stepped back from Reebok in late 1989. And in those days, we didn't have computers, we didn't have smartphones. Everywhere I went, it was traveling and meeting and writing letters. We didn't have emails, we had telex and things like that. So when I stepped back, I decided I would take some time off and go to Tenerife, which is a very nice island, just off Africa, sun shines, and I wanted to lie back and enjoy life. But then, of course, we got computers, we got smartphones, and we got Google, and we got Wikipedia. And they're telling me how Reebok started. And of course, that's not how it started. There was also a photograph of Joe Foster, founder of Reebok. And it certainly wasn't me. He may have been called Joe Foster, but it certainly wasn't me. So that's what prompted the idea. I thought, well, it's about time I wrote the story. We've got to get the story straight, otherwise there'll be so many stories that maybe I should write a book. So that's how I started.
So those of you who read the book in the past or have scanned through it today, the book has 35 chapters. I love the 35th chapter is a chapter called The Founder's Role, which is a beautiful chapter. Having been a founder of a business for 22 years, I still found it relevant and retreated. But the book starts with this first chapter called Some People Run to Win. And in that, Joe, you confess rather, that neither do you like running, nor do you like shoemaking. You're not good at it.
Well, I guess for a more successful running shoe company, that probably says the opposite to what you would expect. And I guess somebody said, look, you've got to start this book in a certain way. And that is ask a few questions. And if you can get people hooked on the first page, maybe you'll read it to the last. So, and to be honest, I didn't like running. And also, to be honest, I didn't like shoemaking because I started the company with my brother Jeff, and Jeff loved the factory. He absolutely loved it. He loved shoemaking. I didn't. So we came to an agreement at that point, and Jeff said, I'll look after the factory, you do everything else. So that was my job. Everything else but making shoes.
Good. Now, I read while reading the book, and I must tell you that, his grandfather started a shoemaking company. It's okay, you can go. His grandfather started a shoemaking company. And I got to learn reading the book that his grandfather was a pioneer in making the running shoes, the spiked shoes. And in Olympics, which were done in 1904, 3 of the records were broken wearing those shoes, right?
That was right. It was one runner. It was in a 1 hour race, just 1 hour at Ibrox Stadium, which is in Glasgow. And during that 1 hour, he broke 3 world records wearing my grandfather's spikes, which was great. And in 1908, we got gold medals. He got gold medals at the Olympics in London. So, yes, he knew something that we call today influencers, how to influence. He gave his shoes to the right people, and they won gold medals or broke world records. That was influencing in the early 20th century.
Joe, in the early part of the book, somewhere you write that you wanted to do well because if you didn't do well, you'd be ignored in the family. And you didn't want to be ignored, right? You've written that in the book. Do you, at this young age of 87 plus, do you like being ignored or you like being found?
I think it's different. During the era of Reebok, my era of Reebok, it was all to do with the company. It was not to do with egos. It was not to do with Joe Foster. People didn't know Joe Foster. They knew Reebok. And that was really the culture that we had in the company. We don't want egos. We want everybody to understand this is about Reebok. So you're talking now at 87. At 87, okay, I wrote a book. And I think somebody said today, What's the point in writing 400 pages if nobody wants to read it? Well, there's not much point. So the idea now is I've got to sell Joe Foster and we've got to sell Shoemaker. We've got to get people to read the book. So this is what we're doing. We're going around, and
your legacy matters to you. I guess your legacy of creating Reebok also matters to you. The right information about what Reebok stands for and stood for and how it was built is also equally important.
Oh, absolutely. We wanted to continue, I suppose, what my grandfather did. He invented the spike run issue. He had leading athletes. He had world records. He had gold medals. And if you've heard of Chariots of Fire, the film, the actual athletes who were immortalized in that actually wore Foster's shoes. So, you know, when you follow on, you need to do something good. So Reebok, it was all a matter of creating that culture, that winning culture, the belief. So yes, you know, we needed to form a legacy. I'll swap you. There we go. Thank you. And that's what we did.
And, you know, Joe, you also write in the book about a personal loss. You start the book by saying the book is dedicated to your daughter, Kay. How does one deal with grief? Maybe grief is a little too strong, but how does one deal with failures at various points in life?
Well, I mean, there's a difference between somebody in your family, and both my brother and my daughter died at a young age, too young. And how do you handle grief? I think you just have to get on with living, and you have to dedicate something to them. My brother, he died just as we got into America. We'd just broken in. That was the beginning. And he never saw Reebok become number one. That was my first grief. Later, my daughter died when we really had become number one. And people say, have you any regrets? And my answer is, look, we became number one. If you become the number one brand in the world, what's to regret? And anything I can regret, I can't change. And that would be my brother and my daughter. I can't change that. Anything else, maybe I could have changed. But we became number one. So I think with grief, you've just got to try to learn to live with it. And there's nothing you can do about your brother dying or your daughter dying. You know, as much as you'd like to change that, you can't.
And in the chapter 15, called a near-death experience, you talk about a near-death experience, right? You talk about...
Remind me on the near-death experience. Was that my flight into Tehran?
Yes.
Right. Okay, yes. Well, I could write a book which it would be titled Around the World in 80 Days. You may have read it, and it wasn't my book. But it was Around the World in 80 Days or less. And it was a Pan Am ticket, which I could go around the world, either east or west. I went east on Pan Am 2. And one of these stops was in Tehran. And we didn't go to the terminal. We just sat there on the apron, and they told us to remain seated, which we did. But of course, a group of military people seemed to come onto the plane, well armed, and they took a man off. Okay, we left, but I think it was within about 5 days, the Iranians the students took the hostages, the American hostages. So possibly that was the nearest I came to a difficult experience, maybe death. But you know, when you travel, and I know a lot of people in this room travel a lot, you're exposed to whatever is out there in the world. But it was an experience, and that Around the World in 80 Days, it was incredible. It's in the book. I could probably have written a book just about that, but it really was my first time around the world. After that, I went around the world about 3 times every year, putting on more distribution for Reebok. And that was a good experience. But yes, that was probably my nearest sort of chance or opportunity.
I've seen the movie Argo, you know, which is involves that incident. Have you watched Argo?
No.
Okay, you should watch it. It's a lovely movie. Now, coming to a key to America, which is chapter 17, you talk about how America, you needed to be number one in America in a significant force, while Puma, Adidas, Tiger, which is now Asics, they were all doing well. And if you didn't do well in America, you couldn't be a global force. And then you got you got a person you knew who wrote to you. Then you got another company that agreed to distribute you, but just before the distribution deal would go, live, they wrote to you saying they've changed their business focus. So give us a sense about what went in your mind then and what you've written in the book.
Well, getting to America, we we're a British company, and the biggest sport in the UK is football. Adidas had completely taken football by the time Jeff and myself started our company. So we had to look around for the best market, and the best market for us was America. I knew it was America. So getting into America, I went there in 1968. By the time I got to America, it was 1979. It took me 11 years. And we had 6 or 7 failed opportunities, but there were experiences. And what we learned it throughout our lives, is the fact that problems are opportunities. They really are. If you look at, at first, maybe for the first 5 minutes, you think, oh, I've got a problem. Then when you've had 1 or 2, you think, this is an opportunity. So it was turning that into an opportunity. And so many times. But the opportunity in America was Runner's World. Runner's World really brought running in America to a big category. That was the category we were in. So we were lucky. We were in that category, and we had to get into the market. Having a 5-star shoe from Runner's World, we had 3 5-star shoes. That eventually got me in, got me Paul Fireman, and that was the beginning of getting into America. And yes, we had to break in, we had to do it well. We were doing it nicely, but running was not the answer to the Reebok growth.
Absolutely right about that. But one thing I found fascinating is he found somebody wrote to him about distributing Reebok in the US. It was Shulang. Shulang. And
Shulang, yes.
And I find him a funny character. And he wrote something I want to read, because he would write too many letters and he was always cribbing, nagging him for more deliveries. And he would never respond to his letters, because by the time he'd write 1, he would write another 2 in response. So tell us a bit about that.
Well, I don't think anybody in this room could really live now without a computer or without a smartphone, and without the way that social media has changed life so much. Can you imagine it? Go back. Imagine that in order to connect with somebody in America from the UK, you had to write him a letter. You had to post it, and you had to wait, not till it got to America, but until he'd read it, digested it, put his answers down, posted it. We're talking 4 weeks at the best. Can we run a business when response takes 4 weeks? Not today. That's changed tremendously. But that's what we had to. So quite often, you would have more than 1 question. You'd write something down. Then maybe a week later, you'd write another letter. So these letters are coming in, and we're trying to respond to the first, and you already get another letter. So life was difficult, and it got to the point where it was quite stressful. And Shulang, as we're saying, as Anurag said, the problem is that we were not answering things that he was asking questions on, and the whole thing was, it became, well, I gave it up and gave it to Jeff, who was running the factory, because most of the questions were about the factory. And eventually, Jeff gave it up because he just couldn't get the answers. So, surprisingly enough, we stayed with Shulang for about 4 years trying to get this working. In the end, we just had to agree that this wasn't working. And I knew the problem was we needed that pull factor. And it wasn't until we got the 5-star shoes that we got the pull factor from the market. Trying to push onto the market when you're so far away is very difficult. Today, I think it's a lot easier. We know it's a lot easier. But in those days, yes, it was quite difficult.
You know, now, of course, you can Google, you can read the book, but how did you come up with the name Reebok?
Well, Reebok, we started off, Jeff and I, we left the family company in 1958. The family company, J.W. Foster, my grandfather started it. It was great, successful. When he died, and he died in 1933, I'm born in 1935. I happened to be born on my grandfather's birthday, 15 months after he died. But his sons, my father and uncle, you know what Addie Dassler and Rudy Dassler were like. They just didn't get on. So Rudy Dassler left and set up Puma. The Foster family, my uncle John, commonly known as Billy, and my father James, they didn't get on. In fact, they fought, they feuded. Jeff and myself, when we actually worked at the factory, had to drag them apart on more than one occasion. So that's not good for a company. We were going nowhere. Foster's were going nowhere. We decided we had to leave. So we did. We left in 1958, and in 1960, we were told by our accountant, you've got to register that name Mercury. A longish story, but we couldn't because it was pre-registered. And the agent said, bring me 10 names. And I'm thinking, 10 names? You know, this is our company. We have to be in love with this. However, I go back, we sit around the table, and we're trying to think of 10 names. Cougar Sports, pretty good, yeah. Falcon Sports. Those got at the top of the list. Now, let me take you back to 1943. 1943, I'm 8 years old. And it's the middle of World War II. Like COVID, you couldn't go anywhere. But we had local events. And I am entered into an 80-yard race. And I win it. I won the race. Great. Of course, I had an advantage. I had Foster spikes. Nobody else had spike shoes. But I won. And I go up to collect my prize. I'm 8 years old. And what do I get? A dictionary. And I'm saying to the guys, where's the football? What can I do with a dictionary? You know, I could probably kick it around a bit, but not as good as football. However, I have the dictionary. And it's a Webster's dictionary. I don't know if anybody knows what Webster's dictionary means. It's an American dictionary. And the American, as against the Oxford English dictionary, some slightly different spellings. So I fast forward now to 1960. We're looking for a new name. And I just love the letter R. I don't know why. I just loved it. So my dictionary there, my American dictionary, one in 1943, is on my desk. And I turn it to the letter R. And it doesn't take long flipping through the beginning of R to get to R, E-E-B-O-K. What's that? There's a small South African gazelle. We're a running company. A gazelle. Fantastic. Top of the list. And I take this to the agent with another 8 or 10 names, and I say, look, we need this. We really need this. We can be in love with Reebok. So we want it. And he's a lawyer. Well, okay, we'll do our best. Took about 2 weeks for him to come back because they tested all these names. And he came back, came on the telephone and said, Joe, you've got your wish. The only name that really is clear is Reebok. There's a couple of problems. One of them was that if somebody starts making shoes out of Reebok skin, you can't stop them. Well, Jeff and I looked at each other and thought, no, that'll never happen. That can't happen. So we got Reebok. However, the registrar, in his wisdom, said, well, we can only put you in Part B of the register. Okay. We didn't even know there was a register 2 or 3 months earlier. So we're now in the register Part B. 10 years later, the registrar came back and said, we've moved you. We've moved you to the A section of the register. And why is that? Well, everybody now knows that Reebok is a shoe, and the animal has to come second.
Beautiful. My last question before I open. Now, there's another shoe entrepreneur, or the global FMCG entrepreneur in Phil Knight, who wrote the Shoe Dog. So when you're thinking of your book's name, you kept a beautiful, simple, philosophical name, Shoemaker. It's easy, it's philosophical, it's metaphorical. I'm sure there were comparisons of Shoemaker with the Shoe Dog. What do you have to say to that?
Well, I have read Shoe Dog, and I'm amazed how many parallels we had. But then again, Phil Knight in America, he had to go to the East, he had to go to Asia to get his shoes made. Eventually, whilst we had a factory, we were shoemakers. Phil Knight was an accountant, we were shoemakers. But I had to tread a very similar path. And really for us to get the volumes, to get the price, we all ended up in Asia. I've never met Phil Knight. When I next get to America, maybe we can arrange that. But our stories are very similar, and I liked his story. I think mine's a bit more interesting. I would, wouldn't I? But and there are some differences. But yes, and Reebok and Nike really had a good fight in the late 90s and the early noughties. Unfortunately, Reebok didn't come off the best. But, I have a great admiration for Phil Knight.
Fantastic. By the way, my favorite chapter is a chapter where they say Reebok gets celebrity. And I wish I'd met you earlier because you started sponsoring tennis. You used to sponsor Michael Chang,
Yes.
Aranxa Sanchez Visario. Well, I don't know if that's how it's pronounced.
Right.
I used to watch a lot of tennis, so really loved reading the book. I strongly recommend it, and it will help all entrepreneurs or people who are trying to do something. We can take 2-3 questions. Mr. Pillai, any question you want to ask?
Once you raise your hands.
Yes, Sakshi wants to ask a question.
My name is Sakshi Sasani. So my question is very generic, but as a budding entrepreneur and a marketer in this competitive landscape, I come across many rejections. So how I tell myself to keep going is that there's a place for you somewhere around the globe where somebody will know your worth. And that's how I keep going. And so my question is that because I am an aspiring entrepreneur and I read a lot of books, and Shoemaker is one of the books that I ordered before coming here, and I actually read it a lot, and I really love reading books. So my question for you is, do you think great founders can make great employees?
Would you say the question again?
Can great founders be also great employees?
Can a great founder be a great employee? Well, I think if you're a founder, you see a reason for being that. You are employed, that's fine, but you can see a reason to be a founder. Yeah. And if you see that, then that's your ambition. That's where you want to be. That's your optimism. That's going to take you. And I think you can be a good employee, but I think also, if you're an optimist, and if you're also, you can see opportunity. And you just take it, and if you get it right, and it takes a lot of perseverance, as you've experienced, to really get it. You also need to, we call it white space. You need to look for the white space, the space that will allow you in. As I said, when my brother and myself we left our family business, football was the thing to go into, but football by then was really owned by Adidas, and we couldn't go there. So we had to look for the white space, places where we could go and make a difference.
Like.
And Sakshi, rejection, I keep saying rejection is not rejection, it's redirection. I keep saying no means next opportunity. It doesn't mean no. I honestly believe that. I've seen any more questions. Bhavna wants to ask a question. Dharmender wants to ask a question.
So, Mr. Foster, firstly, such an honor having you. Welcome to India and welcome to the forum. Big, huge fan of Reebok. I personally adore the brand. I have a lot of your collection. You know, there's something which I've been meaning to ask you in your conversation with Dr. Annurag Batra was that you're at the top, right? You're number one. What is it that you think every morning that inspires you to take forward and continue this legacy, what you've created? What is that one thing which inspires you personally? What keeps you so active that you can inspire all of us today? What is that one thing, sir?
Well, I think to a good extent, you need to be an optimist. You need to see that glass is half full all the time. You need to see the good in everything. There'll be bad days, but really, people ask me what are the three most important things. And number one is have fun. Number two is have a lot more fun. And number three, it must be fun all the time.
That's why you're friends with Billa.
Yes. Cheers to the glass that is half full.
Yeah.
Sure.
So yeah, the mic to Dharmender.
There are plenty of companies which flounder either financially or in other ways once the founders hand over the company to professionals. There are plenty of companies, just two I can think of off the top of my head is, as an Apple consumer, I certainly feel that Apple is no longer Apple after Steve Jobs. And Sony after Akio Morita is not even a pale shadow of its former self, it's nothing. So do you have concerns, or what would you say to this phenomenon?
I think there are companies that just stay there. They're able to move with time. And I think if you create the right culture, and we were fortunate, we created a winning culture, and that winning culture becomes very infectious. And a lot of people get the benefits from that winning culture. And a lot of people love the brand. And with Reebok, if you get that love for a brand, it continues. And you have to move with the time. Reebok, the end of the 90s into the early 2000s, lost direction. And I think when you lose that direction, you could lose an awful lot of the following that you have and that credibility. And during that period, and then it was sold to Adidas, and Adidas really, they just wanted to take some of the assets of Reebok and help Adidas grow.
Right.
They paid a lot of money for it, you can't blame them. But now Reebok have come out with ABG. ABG have given Reebok a tremendous opportunity, because what Reebok had lacked was visibility. Now we're going to get visibility back, and we meet a lot of people who say, oh, I love Reebok. I've just not been able to find it. Now they're going to be able to find it. And I think there's an awful lot of people out there and an awful lot of feeling for Reebok. And I think it's going to be amazing. This next 2 or 3 years is going to be amazing to see Reebok join that top group, the Adidas, the Nikes, and Pumas. I think Reebok is going back up there again. And when people, we've heard them talk to ABG and say, well, we want to get to number 3. My question is why? Surely number 1 is a spot you need to be. So, that's the optimism. That's what you need to be. And if you can keep that going through the company, you will do it. I think it's what people believe in. And if what you can make people believe in. And if you make them believe you can be number 1, you'll be number 1. And you've got to believe that. So for Reebok and for anything that wants to be a long term, it's creating enough credibility, creating that interest and keeping that going and that energy, that excitement. And I think Reebok is going to get back that excitement. I don't think it ever left, really. I just think the volumes were not there. Adidas, really, and you can't blame Adidas, they wanted to grow Adidas. But now I think we're going to see Reebok back again.
Thank you.
Thank you. I can take one more question, or we can close this. Samriddhi, I introduced Samriddhi, who's the founder of Random, to Mr. Foster, and she said to Mr. Foster that when I was younger, buying a Reebok shoe was one of our kind of bucket list, and she ticked that.
Hi, sir. Good evening.
Good evening.
Sir, I am a founder myself, and it's been a very up and down journey as a founder. What is your advice to a founder? That I know optimism is what you said, but being optimist takes a lot of courage. How do you survive those difficult moments when you are absolutely on the verge of giving up?
And I mean, I can, but hope is not a plan.
Yeah.
Hope is not a plan.
No, hope is not a plan. I think if you're an optimist, you're born that way. I think you need to have those genes. People ask me, can you become an optimist? No. You are an optimist or you're not an optimist. And that really applies to an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is an optimist. An entrepreneur takes risks. They're not risks that like gambling on a horse, or they're risks that we can do that. And if you believe in it, you will do it. And I think a lot of people may give up because people say to me, you spent 11 years getting to America. Did you not feel like giving up? Ever? No. We're going to get there. We're going to get there. It's step by step. Sometimes you move back a bit. Sometimes you move sideways. But to be successful, it really is an advantage to be an optimist. It really is. Yeah. And I would always recommend that if you're an optimist, you have a chance, and that you just keep trying. Failure is not a problem. Failure is an experience. Failure is someone that says we're doing something wrong. Just as I said with problems. We were challenged with our name by Adidas. Adidas, 4 years into our company, Adidas sent us a letter because our silhouette was 2 stripes and a T-bar. And Adidas said that 2 stripes and a T-bar was sort of conflicting with the 3 stripes of Adidas, and their lawyers said, you've got to stop. It took us 5 minutes to say, okay, what should we do? And then we realized Adidas know we're here. Adidas need to write us a letter. They must find that we're a bit of a challenge. That's great. We pinned that on the wall. We kept it there for years. It was great. So what do? We changed our silhouette, and we came up with the Vector. And we changed our name because we had to. It was a better name. Reebok was a better name than Mercury. The Vector was better than the 2 stripes and the T-bar for our silhouette. So when you've got a problem, that gives you an advantage. That gives you an option. You can change. And I think they call it pivoting these days. So you just pivot.
You're pivoting. And I must say, I've never met him. He's in heaven. I hope I met you when I was younger. But Randy Pausch, who wrote the book Last Lecture, said experience is when you don't get what you want. It's not failure. Every failure is an experience. You go through that experience and you become better. And ideas fail, projects fail, businesses may fail. Entrepreneurs and human beings never fail if they learn from it and course correct.
Right.
So it's not easy. Sounds like it's not easy. You and me know that. But look at his optimism. And Julie, I'm glad you are here in India. You can see the love for Reebok. That, one day, into knowing her about 2 months back, or maybe 45 days back, she sent me an article. I returned home. It was about 8:30, 8:45 in the night from work. An article in some media product that first time I was encountering. If I don't know a media product, it doesn't exist. Or it's like, my first business is on the business of media. It's really a leadership business. And I said, don't worry. One, I don't know about this site. If I don't know, it doesn't mean much. Second, trust me, Reebok has lots of respect in India. And you can see that was a spontaneous. Please give Mr. Joe Foster a big round of applause. I know you sat, most of you have been here since the morning. Dharmendra, you, Mr. Jain, congratulations to you. Dipali, thank you for coming back and attending this session. I can take one last bonus question. If you don't have it, I will ask you. At this young age, do you still have a bucket list?
Oh, yes, we definitely. We've got to travel the world. We want, and I guess in terms of traveling, there are plenty of places I haven't been.
Which ones?
Which one? Well, surprisingly enough, we just met a couple of Russians the other day, and I'd love to go to St. Petersburg. Not the right time, but it would be nice to get there. And I hope one of these days that this thing settles down and we can be sensible again, and we could do that traveling. But St. Petersburg would be a nice place to go. Indeed, it would. But wrong timing.
Okay, and this is his first time to India. So you can see he talked about optimism. It's a French word. I'm sure you love French. Joie de vivre. It's the joy of life. Taking day and having fun is equally important. If you don't enjoy what you do and you don't have fun around it, you cannot celebrate the lows. You got to sometimes celebrate the lows to get the highs. So give Mr. Foster a big round of applause. Thank you for writing this book. It's his first time in India. We've done this event on a Saturday. He goes to Pune tomorrow, so spread the word. We're at the Hyatt Regency in Pune. Wednesday he's in Bangalore, and hopefully we'll go to a Reebok store in Bangalore.
We intend to.
Yeah, and we'll talk to the Reebok team in India, which is now the Aditya Bikram Birla Group team, the ABG team. Then he goes to Jaipur on the 27th, 28th in Delhi, more home turf, and 29th Agra. So hopefully he'll see a bit of Delhi, India, and I hope we can get him back and get him into a bigger audience. But it will get amplified in media, and I'm sure you'll get the right. People in India have a very positive experience with Reebok. So I just want to say that again because that day you seemed very concerned. So please give him a big round of applause, and we'll call it an evening. You can even give him a big standing ovation. It'll be in order. I know we are about 45, 50 people, but it's the engagement that matters. Thank you, Joe. I'm glad. Thank you so much.
Thank you.